So the goal of this session is to program MIDI triggers to make EOS do something. So the example that we're going to use is the MIDI triggers in Express. We're going to use those as our inspiration for a couple of triggers to create in show control. So back in the Express days, you could have an external MIDI controller, and we had some generic triggers that triggered stuff. So for example, a C5 as a MIDI note could trigger sub 1, and then higher on the scale on that note could go up to sub 12, and then you go up the next octave to start at 13. The other thing that you could do is trigger with a program change cues in a cue stack. And you could have A-B faders back then and C-D faders back then. So EOS uses cue lists rather than the fader pairs. So this functions slightly differently, but we're going to use these as inspiration for what we're going to create in the EOS side. So we're going to zone in first on a Submaster bump switch execution. So the idea is when the note is depressed, that Submaster will be bumped on. So on EOS, I'm going to go into tab 11 show control. I can do that by clicking on the plus and going into show control. We're going to create a list. So I'm going to press 1 enter to create my first list. By default, show control thinks that you want to have a SMPTE timecode as your event list. So we're going to change that by clicking on type. And we're going to make this a network input. So MIDI timecode might be distracting initially here, but the MIDI strings are considered in the bucket of network inputs. So we'll do soft key 5, and we're going to press enter. So we need to define an input to create an action. I'm going to label this Submaster. And then I'm going to click on the input side. MIDI string is the more option for soft key 2. And it takes me over to this menu here. So this is kind of the MIDI raw, MIDI note, string sort of thing. So let's refresh here. What I want is MIDI note C5 to be my bump for Submaster 1. So I'm going to do note on, and it's C. I'm going to define the octave. We're going to change the velocity to 127. And then we're going to press OK. So now it knows note on. Then we're going to make our action Submaster 1. So I need to give it a target. And then I'm going to say bump. So when the note is on at that full level, it will bump sub 1. If we create event 2, and we're going to make the next note sub 2 bump. So the next highest note from here is C sharp or D flat. We're going to leave it as 5, 1, 2, 7. Then we're going to make Submaster 2 bump enter. So we're going to do 2/1 to create our second list. And it defaults again to SMPTE, so we need to change that to network. We're going to give ourselves a network input, and we're going to press enter. We're going to give it a label. We're going to say cues. And then we're going to look at our cheat sheet. So to execute Q1 was program change 1. And that only has a range of 1 through 127. So if I needed to activate Q 128, I would need controller change 70 and give it a 0 to get to this, and it increments up to 255. For now, we're going to focus on queues 1 through 127, and then you can make it more EOS specific from there. So we're going to create an input. We're going to give Midi string. We get into this thing, and let's recall here, we need program change. Program change. One gets us our program number 1. So this should be Q1. We're going to click OK. And our action, Q 1/1, if you're dealing with multiple queue lists, it already knows Q1. Let's establish a pattern. So we're going to do our event 2 in this list.
31. Remember, it's telling me a channel.
And we're going to go to Midi string, program change 2. We're going to click OK. And this will be Q2. So what I don't feel like doing is writing all these events. So first I'm going to export to a CSV file, and I'm just going to drop it on my computer's desktop for now. I'm going to deselect all, and I'm going to select show control. So that's the data that I want to export as a CSV file. I'll give it a generic name like this. And now we're going to open it in a CSV editor, such as Excel. Okay, so I've exported my show control information to a CSV and opened it in Microsoft Excel because I'm trying to save myself some work for later. So one of the things I can do is I can move this material. So I'm pressing Control X to cut. And I'm going to paste down here and get this out of the way. And this example actually works better for queues. So I'm going to cut that and place it here for my example. So this is just tidied up a little bit. So I have this first line here that's showing me the label and the event listing and all that sort of stuff. So this is event list 1 and then event list 2. And in Excel, just so happens that the formatting works out for me pretty well if I want to use the built-in tools to expand the queues. So you can see the Midi note control and the queue number, and Excel happens to be able to see this. It recognizes a sequence. So if I use that black plus, it auto-generates and it knows to move this number over and this number over and maintain this number. So this is going to be easy to bring in and automatically bring some stuff in. But it just so happens for these MIDI notes for the sub control, if I try to generate that, you'll see it doesn't know the hexadecimal numbers for MIDI here as a source. So this won't come in very well. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to bring this ending piece here, drop it here. I'm going to save. And then we're going to bring that back into EOS. So I'm back in here. Instead of export, I'm going to import. I'm going to import CSV. So now you can see in event list 2, it automatically created all these additional program changes.